Hey everyone, welcome to Keto and Krime. Today I've got a very special live stream. Joining me today is my good friend Roberta Glass from Roberta Glass True Crime Report out of New York. And we are going to discuss the Idaho 4. This is only the second time I've covered this case. I did a little brief summary of the case up until the point there had been no arrests made at that time, but this is the first actual discussion I've had since arrest was made in the case. But first, I'd like Roberta to introduce herself. I know she's a frequent guest on the channel, but for those of you that may not know, Roberta, tell us about your channel and what you do.
Thank you for that very nice introduction. I Roberta Glass. I have the Roberta Glass True Crime Report. It's a podcast, also a YouTube channel where I talk about true crime from a factual basis based on the court record, the transcripts, or any other kind of reliable source that I can find. But really, my passion is going to court. I'm a trial junkie, and I've covered the Ghislaine Maxwell case, where I from the court, the Larry Ray case, which is a case of a cult. It's a lot more involved in that. That's happened at my alma mater, Sarah Lawrence College. That was the most amazing trial. And I also covered the Nexium case, which ended up being the Keith Raniere trial, but from the early hearings on right through to Keith Raniere's trial. So, and I live in New York, and I think that's about it. I can't wait to talk to you about the Idaho murders. I'm fascinated by.
Roberta is the real deal, everyone. She goes to trials, she listens to trials, and she's like my role model. I hope to get to go to the Daybell trial. I'm gonna fly out to Idaho and see if I can get in.
But that will be fascinating. Yeah. I really hope that happens. Are you raising money for that?
I'm just gonna try to pay for it myself.
Oh, look at you!
I don't usually try to raise money for things.
I was just thinking it was expensive. I was like, good for you, good for you. That if you do that, I definitely be tuning in, because that is a fascinating case, and would be a fascinating trial for sure.
Absolutely. Well, with that being said, let's jump into the Idaho 4. We do know the most of the facts of the case already, and that there was 4 University of Idaho students murdered around 4 a.m. Between 3 and 4 a.m. November 13th of 2022. They were 3 of them were roommates with 2 other women in a house on King Avenue in Moscow, Idaho. And they were found brutally stabbed. A 911 call came in on November 13th at around noon, Mountain Standard Time, which I believe is what Idaho is on. And we all know there's been a ton of theories on this case. Everybody from the neighbor to a guy at a vape shop to one of the victims, Kylee Gonzalez's ex-boyfriend, has been accused. We do know that the victims were stabbed with a hunting/military grade knife, and they finally made an arrest just after Christmas of last year. So we're going to talk about kind of the facts of the case. We may go through the affidavit. Then we're going to talk about the accused, Bryan
Kornberger.
Koberger.
Yeah, what am I calling him?
And our opinions. Roberta's like me. We kind of stick to the facts of a case. We try not to offer any conjecture or opinions. But one thing that we had agreed on, Roberta, is that this case screamed Richard Speck to us both.
Yes, I was really, when the killers, I'm just going to call him the killer. Mm-hmm. And I think that's, I will get to the media coverage, but when I first saw his picture, I thought to myself, I didn't think that guy couldn't have done it. Mm-hmm. I just thought, oh, that looks like a guy who could commit murder. He's got the creepy black dead eyes, 1,000-yard stare, the really in a really intense look in his face. And now when you look at the pictures of him, that's his mugshot. Now, when you look at the pictures of him smiling, then you're looking at something else. I think that's his fake public persona that he's built for himself. But, you know, can I talk about the media coverage a little bit?
Yeah, go for
my
it.
disappointment in it? You know, I've just been really disappointed in the media coverage, which has been so focused on the killer. NBC did a news piece all on the killer's family and their pain, never mentioned the victims, never even mentioned the word victims once, never mentioned their name, never mentioned their families, what they're going through. And however you may feel about Nancy Grace, she was on air talking about this, and the man interviewing her made a sort of throwaway comment that right after the killer got charged with these crimes, he made a sort of a throwaway comment that he hoped that the victim's family would have closure now. And Nancy Grace stepped right on that and said, these families correctly, that these families do not get closure. There is no closure for them. And in essence, this is not a quote, these are my words, not hers, that they are serving a life sentence of grief for this guy's crime. And to me, it really looks like very Richard Speck-ish, very much a crime, a thrill kill kind of crime. A crime because this is a psychopath who enjoys killing. He's been fantasizing, planning. This is a planned murder. We know now that his cell phone pinged 12 times near where the murder scene happened. Kylee Gonzalez, one of the victims, she had a stalker that was bothering. Now, do we know that this is Bryan? It sure sounds a lot like his MO. He was leaving messages on Reddit trying to get some insight into
criminal
mind and killers. So this is a guy, this is not, I think what he's being portrayed at in the media is some kind of guy, either because of his vegan diet or because of his inability to get women, because of his this whole incel thing, because he couldn't get a girlfriend, he became an incel, and that he just snapped, very much like the kind of coverage Chris Watts got in the beginning, before we found out that he had been planning this, murdering his pregnant wife Shanann and his entire family for weeks beforehand. So I mean, I think that and I noticed that there's a very difference between Fox News seems to be the only one who wants to have the victims' families on and talk about the victims that I've seen. I have not seen all of it, but real difference between that and NBC and other mainstreams, because I think the difference has to do with the fact that they don't accept psychopathy. There is that we have always framed these crimes in a relatable way, that these are that either because of pressures or because of circumstances that they just end up crime of, you brought up in your podcast how the mayor came out and said that this was a crime of passion, meaning someone who was involved with one of the victims and just snapped because of sexual rejection, emotional sexual rejection.
I believe, like I said in that video, I believe that was their attempt not to have everybody clear out of Moscow, because if the university shuts down, they lose like their entire economic base.
Right. But this would be a great time to talk about psychopathy. It'd be a great time to educate the public about stalking. And I don't think the public really understands how stalking is a form of violence in itself, and often comes before violence and even murder. We saw it in the O.J. Simpson case and many other cases where stalking, the killer stalks his victim before he kills them.
Yeah. Well, being that he had been in the neighborhood, or his cell phone pinged off that tower, at least 12 times, we know he had probably been in neighborhood and knew who was there, because it seemed to be very calculated. The fact that, he got Ethan and God, See, the names fly right out of my head. Ethan and his girlfriend on the second floor, and then went on upstairs and got Megan and Kylee on the third floor. I mean, he knew exactly where they were, or maybe he just guessed where they were, or Madison's room upstairs. He kind of knew where they were. So it leads me to believe he had watched them at some point and kind of knew, at least where they lived and what floors they lived on. And then, yeah, go ahead.
They're also a very good-looking bunch of students.
Yeah. Let's do dollars to donuts. They're all very attractive people, even Bryan, even the killer.
Right. Ethan Chapin, Xana Canoodle, Madison Mogan, and Kylee Gonzalez, all very good-looking people. And I was just trying to think that, we know it's just very interesting. Once again, going back to the media coverage, that the media seems to really want to focus on, say, his running partner who ran with him and who had no idea that this guy was dangerous or even capable of doing this. He says in this kind of flat monotone. I'm like, what's going on in those runs? What's that relationship about? This guy noticed nothing but a bartender who sees this guy for 2 minutes, and he was asking women, where do you live? Do you live alone? Stuff like that. Basically, I believe, if this is true, which it hasn't been verified, if this is true that he was going to this bar and he actually got banned from it because of it, I believe he was trying to get women to come home with him and kill them. That he was trying this out before this final plan.
Yeah, that's very reminiscent of Jeffrey Dahmer. Just it happens to be women instead of men.
Absolutely.
That was Dahmer's whole MO. And the whole thing is that, okay, the fact that they got him, say what you want to about cops, and I was a little critical of the cops myself, but it was only because we didn't know anything. And it was because they were keeping it under wraps. They were doing what law enforcement should do and keep it under wraps. This Moscow PD brought in Idaho State Police. They brought in the FBI, and they did this by the book. This was textbook. The fact that the knife sheath was found in Kylee and Madison's room, and they actually got his DNA off of that. And then because of the white Honda Elantra, we kept hearing so much about the fact there was a traffic stop at Washington State University by the campus police. And then the later one in Indiana with his father, and they had his license plate. So they evidently were already suspecting him for other reasons, because his white Elantra had been seen at the gas station, and also other security cameras around the neighborhood.
Yeah.
They went to his home, got in his trash can, got stuff out that had his DNA, did a test, and it matched. That's a 1 in a million shot right there.
Yeah, that was the one thing. I have not had we were talking beforehand, great instincts. My instinct on this case is before they found the killer. But that was my one good instinct about this case, that somehow they matched his DNA from tracking him. But I thought it came from that 4 days where they had him. I don't know if that is even, they were just keeping an eye on him for 4 days, knowing.
I think they were trailing him because of the white Elantra.
Is that right? Exactly. Yeah. Right. But so that was my instinct on it.
And if you've read the affidavit, I think it's page 6, where the officer that's writing the affidavit says that the white Elantra, headed west toward Washington, toward Pullman, which is exactly where Washington State University is. So it was just weird. And then the whole 23andMe, I'm not really sure where that theory came from. If someone in the chat can enlighten us. I know there was something about they used 23andMe, and one of his relatives had taken 23andMe, and they were able to match it that way.
I read a news piece that said that they didn't specify it was 23andMe. They just said one of those.
Oh yeah, one of the. It could have been Ancestry.
Right.
Who knows?
Right. Who knows? Right. I don't know if that's ever been. Yeah, there's a lot of you don't know whether it's misinformation, and a lot of things have actually turned out to be right. They were right to look for this car as people were looking at the vape guy and the
And the hoodie
ex-boyfriend.
guy at the
Right.
the hoodie guy that was next to
Mhm.
Kylee and Madison at the food truck.
Mhm.
And then yeah, so it's obvious he was tailing these people, and I think Ethan was just there and got himself killed. I think he was um just happened to be, unfortunately for him, in the wrong place at the wrong time. He was obviously, I think, stalking the girls. And it,
Absolutely. I think he was looking to take out anybody who could identify him. That's why he left the dog. If the dog could identify him, even with his vegan beliefs, I believe he would have taken out, if that's true or not. I don't even know if he was eating vegan food. Everything could just be phony with this guy. Um, so um, if that's true, then I think that Kylee was the one that was really the thing that the person he wanted to kill. If the stalking reports, if he was the stalker, then I think a logical conclusion. But I think he will plead not guilty in this.
oh yeah,
I
he's
think
already
he
said
wants a
he's going to be
trial.
exonerated. Yeah.
Yeah, and Lord knows, I was talking on my Twitter about he turned off his phone before the murders, uh, so they couldn't track him by his phone to the location of the murders, and during the murders and after. Fortunately,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, his phone pinged near the murders afterwards, because I think he went back for that knife
Mm-hmm.
sheath. Is it called? Is that
Yeah,
correct?
it's yeah, the knife holder.
Knife holder is better,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I just think it's very interesting that Amanda Knox, two of Meredith Kercher's killers, Amanda
Mm-hmm.
Knox and Raffaello Solecito, both turned off their phones in unison from Raffaelle's house
Mm-hmm.
to where Amanda lived and where Meredith Kercher was killed at the exact same time. Turned on their phones again at the exact same time in unison. Also left all kinds of crimes at the scene. Yet Amanda Knox, my point in making that tweet was that Amanda Knox, despite being what she calls exonerated in the third court with the decision where they threw out all the DNA, called it unreliable for some it was political pressure, in my opinion, for
Mm-hmm.
some godforsaken reason, and said she was there at the crime scene and she washed Meredith Kercher's blood off her hands. That those were the facts of the case while they were letting her go, despite that damning statement from the court that let her go. She is treated like a celebrity. Um, and all you have to say is the magic word innocence, from the way that say Fox News is treating Brian Koberger as rightfully as a dangerous and deranged psychopath, and the way that we treat people like Damien Eccles and Amanda Knox. And as long as you say the word innocence or exonerated, all critical thinking goes out the window. That's what I'm saying.
Oh yeah. Well, Made of Rubber has an interesting comment. Celebrities all done the same thing this guy has done, just got caught. There have been a lot of celebrities, I'm sure, that have done this, and the way we tend to make celebrities out of criminals. I mean, you never hear about Dahmer's victims, you never hear about Gacy's victims, you never hear about Speck's victims. We're not really hearing about the 4 young people that lost their lives in this crime. You're hearing about him.
The one I've seen Steve Gonzalez has been out front doing interviews, and good
Mm-hmm.
for him. But because they are usually in such a broken state of grief after these crimes, it takes enormous kind of strength that most people just, and I don't even know if strength's the word, resilience may be a better word, to do these kind of interviews and put yourself in the media spotlight and speak up for your loved one who's dead. You become their voice, and
Mm-hmm.
but it's I'm just shocked by the way he's being treated, and the way that they are projecting a kind of, oh, he looked worried when they mentioned the death penalty. And I played that thing back 100 times, and I could not see any look of worry when they mentioned the death penalty,
Mm-hmm. Well,
or nervousness in court, or
the,
fear, or a kid out of
something
his depth.
something similar was said about the body cam footage from the traffic stop in Indiana. That he looked really upset with his father, tried to interrupt his father when his father said they were coming from Washington, and I didn't really get that. I mean, I heard him kind of talking over his father a little bit, but the body cam was kind of looking at the door of the car, so all you could see was white anyway for a good bit of that body cam footage. I didn't see that either, but maybe they just construed the fact he tried to interrupt his father as he was upset. I mean, who knows? But the fact that they found his DNA and they got a match, that is the key. It's just like with the murder of Paul Howe. The fact that his DNA was a match.
A match. And he got his sentence commuted on nothing. On nothing. Exactly. For no reason whatsoever except a well-moneyed media campaign. And the media will shill for these killers, make excuses 24 hours, 24/7. And it's just very disturbing to me that nobody stands up. I do, but that more of the public doesn't say, what are you doing? I mean, they're making this guy into a celebrity.
Exactly. It really is. I mean, and they're gonna, like I said, it's just like the Gabby Petito case. It's all, it was about, Brian Laundrie. Gabby kind of disappeared from that whole conversation towards the end, and it's really, really sad. It's just like you have these cases that just get picked up by the media and picked up by social media, and they run with them. And this is the latest iteration of that, sadly.
Wasn't that interesting when Brian Laundrie's notebook finally came out, and he wrote ridiculous excuse, like this ridiculous. I think the public's expectation is a perpetual, and I put the media in with the public. I would just say the majority of the public's expectation and the media's expectation is, once again, very much like what I'm saying with this psychopath, loser, criminal, and that they will be more human, that they will give us the truth, that there'll be some great confession in that notebook. And what there was instead was, oh, she tripped and hit a rock, and she was in a lot of pain, out of rain, like she was a dog. I didn't call for help or anything, any kind of, they don't have quite the thinking to really put out a good lie, but and people were wondering if it was true.
That was horseshit. That was a passion killing. They got mad. They were in a fight, and he killed her. That was a crime of passion. Just and then he killed himself, or got killed, or eaten by an alligator. Whatever happened to him, he got. That's what happened.
It was the end, in my opinion, of a very abusive relationship.
Exactly.
Him, the final control.
Exactly. And Ron has an interesting question here. What's your opinion about all these crimes happening in Idaho? Daybell case, Michael Vaughn, Idaho 4. I don't know much about the Michael Vaughn case. I've only heard bits and pieces. I don't know if it's just more media coverage on Idaho right now, or the fact that you've got, like, Idaho is like, population growth is growing faster than any other state in the union. So I don't think you've got the traditional, nice Gentile Idahoans, if that's how you say it, living there. You have all these transplants from California and Washington State, New York, Chicago, all these transplants moving in, and I think they're bringing their crimes with them.
Really, why is Idaho expanding at such a great rate as far as population?
Up until, it's kind of like Texas. It's kind of the haven where people from California tend to go. I'm not blaming people from California for these crimes. Please don't take it that way. But I think it's just one of those where, living was considerably cheaper. But now, I have friends that live in Idaho, and it's not cheap anymore. It's grown with the times. But you have all these transplants coming in, and they're bringing their crime with them. This guy was from Pennsylvania.
That's such an interesting fact. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
And but let's talk about our suspect. I'm going to share something that I created.
Oh, by the way, just to go back to the traffic stop, I think he did look scared that he was going to be pulled in at that moment, scared for himself, and that he was talking to try to normalize the situation. It wasn't. because
It's
there's real, when he says, "Oh yeah, I worked at the University of Washington," it's like
right.
not a great look for you there, dude.
Oh, this is a little something I created. If everyone can see it, of course, there he, Mister the Killer, right there in the middle. But some interesting facts about him. He did grow up in the Scranton, Pennsylvania area. The town he's lived in and was from is about a 30-minute drive or so from Scranton, Allentown, that area. He worked as a security guard, and he was often accused by his high school classmates of being socially awkward, very analytical, but also kind of mean. And I'm not sure what is meant by mean, but they said he could have outbursts and he didn't like to be told that he was wrong, kind of thing. He always had a huge interest in how the human mind works, particularly when it comes to crime. And he did receive an associate's degree in psychology from a local community college, and then attended a Catholic university called DeSales, where he received a bachelor's and a master's in criminal justice, and then was in the graduate criminology program at Washington State and was working as a teaching assistant for one of the professors. And many of some of the students interviewed that were in the classes that he was a teaching assistant for uh, did remark that he was very overly critical when he graded their papers. That he would point out the least little thing, and he had a tendency to over explain or mansplain, is what one of them said. I don't like that term, but that was her term. Things, and would get really, really upset if you told him he was wrong. So again, he kind of still had those same tendencies, it seemed. And then, of course, you throw in the Reddit stuff. This is a man that was obsessed with how criminals operate, and I believe just like Leopold and Loeb, all the way
Mm-hmm.
back in
Oh
Chicago, who were
yes,
also criminal justice students, I believe they tried to get he tried to commit a murder to see if he could get away with it.
absolutely. And I think that he will enjoy his trial. He seemed to be enjoying the hearing he was at,
Mm-hmm.
excited, leaning forward. Um, I think he's proud of what he did. Um, and I think I really encourage people to look at the interview with the student who talks about the very, very critical, like grading way too hard the
Mm-hmm.
papers. Now, that's one of those things that's kind of subjective. I haven't looked at any of the papers but it was what he seems to be. What I got from his interview was that he was expressing that it was the consensus of the class
Mm-hmm.
that this grading was way out. But then it changed closer to the murders where he was giving everybody A's.
Yeah.
And and the,
After a group
and
of
the,
students complained, to the professor.
but the student, I believe, correctly says he had something else on his mind, murder, at the
Mm-hmm.
time of that. And I was like, wow, you have some insight. The student has some insight into this guy that when they pull these criminologists on these shows, they don't have. They don't have. Yeah, that's what he was like. Leave me alone. No, don't. No one complain about me. Let me go under the radar and let me fulfill out my murdering fantasies.
Um, was this a preventable crime? I'm sure in all ways crimes, a lot of crimes are preventable, but this one specifically, I don't know. I mean, serial killers and mass murderers, which I would, at this point, unless he's killed someone else that we don't know about, I would call him a mass murderer, because he murdered over two people in the same place at the same time, like Richard Speck. Um, I don't know. I don't know if this. I think maybe if someone had, I don't know, because he had no criminal history. I don't know if this could have been prevented. It's not like these shooters that we get that have been tailed by the cops and or the FBI, or have been on some watch list for years before they finally kill. He wasn't. So I don't know if this was preventable or not.
Well, yeah, I really appreciate Made of Rubber's comment. It's
Yeah.
like a "this could be you" campaign, right?
Yep.
Where the media is putting the public in the position not of the murder victims, but the murderer. But I just want to say that's a really interesting question. Could this been prevented? Um, I was trained by Gavin and DeBecker, who's someone. who has a whole system of predicting violence. So starting very early on, like with things like ripping up pictures. Like if you're in a relationship, say like when your pictures start getting your boyfriend starts ripping up pictures or your favorite object, breaking your favorite objects, that those are all things that later down going into stalking is one of these things. So there's like red flags that go from concerning to very concerning with stalking to like violence is going to happen any second now.
Right. If he was the stalker,
if he was the stalker, but
right.
if you could say, I mean, if that's true, I think that a murder was prevented in that when they banned him from that bar. If that story is true, we have to say again. And if this story was true, if she had been, if we had been educating, if Idaho University had been educating their students about stalking and really how dangerous it is, and if she had gone to the police, if he had been caught in that, I think it would have prevented this crime, perhaps, but he might have gone on to someone else, some other plan. But this seemed to be a fantasy he was determined to play out.
Yeah. Ron has an issue. If he was trying to commit the perfect murder, Wiley the chief, was it a mistake or did he want to get caught? Well, according to some part of the affidavit, he did attempt to go back and get the chief. So maybe in one part it was a mistake, but maybe like Leopold and Loeb. I keep going back to that case, but it's very, very similar. Leopold obviously wanted to get caught because of some of the things he did. I mean, he left his glasses at the scene of the crime or where they buried the body. So he talked freely about it. He even said, well, if I had done it, I would have done this. Now, we don't know if it would have gotten to that point with Bryan, but it could have very well been he wanted to get caught. It was all about the trial, like Mickey in Scream 2. It was all about the trial.
That's interesting because he seems to think that he will be exonerated. And Lord help us if somehow they can prove that, somehow he can convince a jury that he knew these people and he just dropped this sheath over there hanging out some other time. And Lord knows how you put a case like that together. I think it would be a lot of bribing of witnesses or something. I don't know who's going to come out and say that. But if he could possibly get away with it and they can sort of just throw out suspicion on someone else, just enough to pique the public's interest. Lord knows if we're going to,
It only takes one reasonable doubt. That's what we have to remember. It only takes one reasonable doubt.
Do you think they're going to ask for the death penalty in this case, Tracy?
They did in the Daybell case, in both of them, Vallow and Daybell. That was a lot more people. Well, no, it really wasn't a lot more people they killed. This is more people. So, yes, if they ask for that, I can truly see them asking for it in this case as well.
I think if they do ask for it, we're going to see a lot of his lawyer arguing on a lot of mitigating factors, like his age, 28. I think they're going to bring up psychiatric experts who will shill for him and say he had some kind of form, just like they did in the first Durst trial, where they said that he had some kind of autism. I think they're going to argue some kind of autism argument with him. Well, and say
they're already kind of trying to form the basis of that with the whole veganism thing. I'm not saying that all vegans are crazy. I used to be vegan myself. That's a whole different story. But the whole thing about trying to force his family to buy new pots and pans, that shows a level. Now, most vegans wouldn't worry about that. That shows a level of obsessive compulsive, which could lead into other types of mental illness.
I would, or a psychopath who wants to control his whole family. I mean, the thing, I may not be the best person to comment on this, but I'm just amazed at the amount of parents who will, this whole drive with his dad, his dad's flying to, Washington to go drive back, do this road trip, drive back with him, this sort of in how we're infantilizing young adults nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
It comes up in another case where of Dan Markel. I have an episode coming out where I talk to Dan Markel's mother,
Mm-hmm.
and he talks about his ex-wife who had her parents. Anytime she made a long drive, they would drive with her. She couldn't drive alone. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I may not be the best person because I, dropped myself off at the first day of college myself, but I mean, it just seems like this just absolute inability to let their child be uncomfortable in any way and sort of overprotective and let them really experience the world.
Yeah.
Or maybe they knew something. Maybe they knew that he was getting to be very dangerous or
Well,
had done
also,
something.
and I have to say, it's great. This was great police work, and this was great all the way around. But one thing that does make me a little bit nervous is the level of camera observation there was. And on this guy, they had that car on so many cameras around the neighborhood. The gas station where the clerk said that the clerk was like, took her spare time, or him or her, I'm not sure if it was him or her, but was going through the security footage to find the footage of the Hyundai Elantra. The fact that we're able to find it at Washington State, it just shows in how much surveillance we're under.
Oh yeah, I just got this real ID that you have to have now. Of course, you have to have it you have to have that or a passport to get into federal court after
Mm-hmm.
2025.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, as a court and trial junkie, I'm like, I gotta get this. It's your like driver's license.
Mm-hmm.
It's also you're going to need it to fly after 2025.
Yeah.
But I did not understand, and I read a lot about it, that it was an RFID chip in this driver's license that everybody's going to have it. I don't want to be paranoid, but it does make me a little concerned about their ability to. I mean, they can already track you by your cell phone that now have become a necessity to have now. But this RFID chip and your IDs are just a little over the edge. I mean, it's really Alex Jones territory we're getting into here.
I know I don't want to go that far, but I'm just saying that all the surveillance that
Yes.
neighborhood was under, from Ring cameras to
And wouldn't he
everything
know that if he were supposed to be doing the perfect crime? Wouldn't he know that his car is gonna be tracked on? I mean, isn't he gonna know from, like, say, the Porco case in upstate New York, where that was really like him, guy who killed his mother and father, also a college kid, that he was caught going through the toll taking thing. Wouldn't he know from other cases that they can track your car? I mean, that's the number one way they can. I obviously knew you could track your phone, but he didn't have the discipline. This seems like a highly disciplined guy.
It's almost like
to keep his phone off.
Almost kind of like he knew to turn it off while the crime was being committed, but that's it. Ignoring all the other times he's had the phone in that area. You get a burner phone if you really want to do it right. I'm not trying to tell people how to avoid that, but that's one way you could do it.
Right. I mean, I think everybody who called these cops Keystone cops, incompetent, I understand the frustration, and the victims' families should be frustrated. That's the right way to feel.
Steve Gonsalves, he was I think that led the charge, but even he's come out and said that he didn't know, he didn't know everything. Obviously they were trying to keep what they could under wraps for reasons. They weren't going to announce that they had a suspect because they didn't want this guy to run.
Absolutely, and yeah, he's made his peace with the police, but for the media to pick it up and say this is the case, that look how incompetent. It really, this is an extremely hard job to do, extremely damaging job to your body, your psyche, and they just get thrown under the bus. So and YouTubers who've accused everyone of murder will face no criticism at all.
I know, and I
making a fortune doing it too.
I had theories. I had a mass murderer or a serial killer wannabe in training on the mind. I didn't have any actual, suspects, but I did have it narrowed down to that in my own mind. I would never publicize that. But the one thing that is nagging at me, and you and I discussed this briefly before we went on air, is, okay, I believe it was uh, the initials in the affidavit, it was either DM or BM. Excuse me if it's not
DM.
DM. The roommate that was on the first floor was the eyewitness that said she saw somebody 5'10" or taller, bushy eyebrows, athletic build, with a mask, walking toward her. She said she just froze, and he walked past her. Two things: if he really didn't want to leave any witnesses, how is she alive? And I'm not please don't take this as a kiss. It's not. And then also, the murder took place at around 4 a.m. And she heard the crying. She heard the noise. She said that in the affidavit. She heard a male voice saying, "I'm trying to help you," kind of thing. Why was 911 not called until almost noon?
That's
And
the $1 million question.
mm-hmm.
And why, how that happens. I mean, I've been talking to my friend about this, who's very has been right on predicting everything from when the traffic stop footage came out before the affidavit. She said, "Oh, they're tracking this guy. They're tracking this guy. They know. They know." I was like, "Really? You're not? I'm not sure. I'm not sure what they know." And I mean, just been right from beginning to end on this. Her feeling was that maybe the kind of environment of the house had, being such a party house, they had the police there with noise complaints before, had really desensitized her to danger.
Yeah.
And her other theory was that she maybe was on some kind of substances.
Yeah.
Like alcohol or a combination of alcohol and something else.
Or just fell asleep, was scared.
Right. Fell asleep. Yeah.
Sat down, stared in the blackness and just fell asleep, especially if she had been drinking. But she was able to tell them that, or perhaps they got that information off the Ring camera, that I believe it was Xana, Ethan's girlfriend, had ordered DoorDash around 4 a.m. And that, they'd already questioned the DoorDash driver and cleared him. But it's still sus, just like my friend Ron down there saying it's extremely sus, is why there was a 7-hour delay in the calling of 911, because it could be a generational thing. Maybe, I've always been very good friends with anybody I've ever roommated with, and I would have, even if I had seen that, as soon as I was sure that the perpetrator was gone, I would have gone upstairs. I would have first of all called the police, said there was an unknown person in my house with a mask, because that is sus. And then I would have probably gone and checked on my roommates, because I was packing even in college. I would have had a gun and I would have been up there checking. But
right. And the way that they called on this scene was very weird. That this is something that my friend points out very insightfully, that they called up and said that they have unconscious people here. They, by the description of the scene, from what we read in the affidavit, this was something that you wouldn't mistake for an unconscious person. This was a mass slaughter. And yeah. I just don't get what's going on there with the
fact that I believe at least one of them, Xana, was out of the bed on the floor. So there had to be some movement. There had to be, if the witness was on the bottom floor and they were on the second floor, Xana and Ethan, and she was out of the bed, there had to be a thump, there had to be footsteps, there had to be something, and that's just weird to me.
I think there's a lot of I don't know. Can I go back to something that you brought up? The fact that he said to his victim, "I'm here to help," or "I'm going to help you." I think it was the latter. I'm going to help. I'm going to help you. Yeah. So basically, getting her to put down her defense, thinking that I'm really the good guy here to rescue you from that other guy that's running around killing people. And that is such an evil exploitation for your. I mean, that is, to me, the biggest evidence we have yet of psychopathy. that he could say that. I mean, I think the biggest evidence is that he killed 4 people in the cold
Yeah,
blood,
course.
obviously.
But
But
some
of the
villains don't know
smaller
their villains.
pieces of evidence, right?
Some villains don't know their villains, and that's what makes them even scarier.
I think he has disdain for other people. I think he feels above other people, and disdain for his, victims.
Oh, Made of Rubber has an interesting question here. Did someone encourage him to do it? That's quite possible. He evidently struggled to get along with people, especially with women. He was very socially awkward. Maybe someone did encourage him to do it to, fit in or something. I mean, that's possible, but yeah, I don't know. But
Unlikely. Wouldn't you say unlikely?
Yeah,
I don't think this guy's listening to other people too much. I think this guy is marching to his own psychopathic drum. I don't think he care. I think that he wants to. I think he wants to do this murder and get away with it, and prove that he's smarter than everybody else. Obviously, he knew when he decided to major in criminology, he knew something was wrong with him. And he studied it to try to study what was wrong with himself. Not wrong with himself. To basically how he could act out on these fantasies, how he could go forward, how could he do this in a way where he could manipulate at the highest rate. And the highest rate that he can manipulate is to do a murder and get away with it. And he is looking forward to this trial. And unfortunately, his family looks like they're going to enable him.
Yeah.
By hiring experts, by announcing that they're looking forward to his, by having their lawyer announce that he's looking forward to exonerating himself. And all this nonsense. Give me a break.
He is going to be, he's been extradited to Idaho. He did not fight that at all.
Right. Like a movie star.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got a bullet. I mean, there's been different reports on this, that it's a bulletproof vest. Some reports that it's a suicide suit. To my eye, it looks like a bulletproof vest. Helmets, private transportation, surrounded by guards. Like he's a movie star, a celebrity. And I know we have freedom of the press, but there's got to be some kind of way that we can kind of ease down on this, because other psychopaths, by other people, I mean other psychopaths, look at this and want to be, who want to have these fantasies, look at that and are such losers in their life, and they want to be notorious this way.
Right. And Robert has an interesting comment. He didn't see her. It's possible. Absolutely. He did not see her. And that's why she's still alive. I mean, I wasn't implying that she had anything to do with it. My main suspect was, she said that he was walking toward her. So of course I automatically thought that he probably could see her, or facing her. So, but I'm not saying anything like ominous about that. But what I'm also saying is that my whole thing is that why was there a 7-hour delay when he called when the 911 was called? That's my biggest thing.
And it's so unclear what that 911 call consisted of and who made it. It's very confusing.
Yeah,
exactly. Because they say it's a bunch of students. The phone was the phone passed. Did I read something that said the phone was passed around? Am I imagining things? I can't remember exactly now.
Well, I mean, it was a party house. I mean, it was probably a single family home that had been converted to house up to 8 people. So it was definitely a party house. I'm sure. And it's probably they were used to people coming and going all the time. So maybe she was just desensitized or passed out or went to sleep. So,
but how do you get desensitized to a guy in a mask running around in full black outfit and from what I've read, apparently wearing gloves? That to me reads I mean, have we gotten as a country, so has our youth gotten so naive or out of it that they don't sense danger? I don't know what's going on. It's very odd.
I hope not.
I mean, that's really one of the things that women usually have, ingrained in them as sort of a natural instinct. I mean, that's Gavin de Becker's theory.
Stranger danger.
Right. He wrote a book called The Gift of Fear, which is these instincts that we have that we can't really quite pinpoint are the things that, especially as because women are weaker and smaller than men,
Hmm.
generally, that's one of the things that keep us, alive, that are just instinctive, and that we're told to go against them in favor of being polite or in favor of being liked or getting along.
Absolutely. Um, Robin's egg said COVID protocols turned confusing. So yeah, maybe we have become a little more desensitized
That's
to
true.
COVID.
That's a good point, Robin's egg. I didn't even think about COVID, but I don't know. I don't know. I just can't even imagine it. But then again, I sat through an entire trial of my alma mater where they took no responsibility to a guy going right from prison to the college, moving into the bed of his daughter's best friend and sleeping there, living there on the college campus and starting a cult that they
Hmm.
just had no idea on a tiny campus of less than 1,000 people. That's
Yeah.
where they know everything. Like you have a kitten, they get that kitten out like the next day. It gets reported somehow mysteriously. Not that I ever had a kitten, but that kind of thing. They just took no responsibility. So I just find it very weird that
Yeah.
nobody finds that a big red flag.
And Robert he says there's too much crime, and I assume you're a man, Robert. I apologize if you're not. Robert says that too much crime in the UK too. We have met police officers at our landfill site where I work. Yeah, crimes run all over the place. I've covered several crimes in the UK and Europe in general. I mean, this is not a uniquely American phenomenon at all.
Mm.
Uh, but yeah, that's where we stand with the Idaho 4. We'll see how this turns out. I will probably do, another video on it at some point, but I'm not going to be someone that just streams about every little detail on it. We were discussing that too. A lot of social media people just continuously streaming and talking about every little theory, every little detail in the major
Wrongly.
cases.
Yeah, my issue is that they're so often wrong. They're going off on these wrong details, never correct themselves, never apologize,
Exactly.
and have made a great deal of money on these kind of wrong, which I consider it's really it really gets to be dangerous. You don't want to give it you whip up the public. It's a very different with social media. You can ruin someone's life and livelihood this way,
Hmm.
blaming the
Hmm.
murder on them with
And
very little supportive evidence.
Mhm. Full disclosure, I know I sort of walked the line with the Daybell Vallow case because after I did one major deep dive in that case, and then I did deep dives on all the little crazy cult members just because it was so interesting. And then I read all of one of the accused murderers' books and reviewed them on my channel just because I wanted to get a greater understanding. But I will say I didn't run off on every little theory. I did it all from the facts. And so I'm very proud of that.
But look at the murder on the tracks case. They've charged a guy with this crime, and we still have YouTubers and people who say they quote unquote investigated with
Mm-hmm.
no background to investigate anything. But never mind that this wasn't the suspect that they picked, so that the police are wrong. Like they still are holding on to their suspects, their initial suspects in that murder, in that murder of those two little girls. So
Mm-hmm.
I just think it eventually aids the killer to do
Yeah,
this.
it does. It does. It lays the groundwork for a mistrial in a lot of ways.
Exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
I will say, as far as coverage on this particular case, if you do like factual coverage, my good friend JB Gunner over on Crime Time with JB Gunner, he's done a great job covering this case. He's a full-time YouTuber. This is his job, so he has a lot of time to dive into these things. He does cover some of the theories, but he goes in and researches it, breaks it down, and calls out YouTubers when they're misbehaving. So if you really want a good in-depth case, go find him. I will tell you, he's a little rough around the edges. He's a political commentator too, so he has a couple of different channels. But if you don't mind somebody laying it out and using a little profanity to lay it out, then he's great, especially on this case.
Excellent. And can I just do a plug for our show on
Yeah,
Sunday?
yeah, of course.
So join me and Tracy on my channel on Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern time, and we're going to be talking about John Wayne Gacy, that loser. He's a
Yeah.
clown.
Oh, that one. That I know we'll talk about it more, but that one, the fact that he was so highly placed in the Democratic Party, not blaming the Democratic Party, but highly placed in the Democratic Party in Chicago, and just was able to be killing people and running for office, killing people and running for office. That one has always baffled me.
Unbelievable. It's just an unbelievable story. And and there's someone who's become, a famous, like a killer psychopath icon.
Mm-hmm.
Doing
That
it.
Dahmer, Ted Bundy, that's the trifecta of
Right.
serial killers. Ted
Absolutely.
Bundy. And then I think probably the one that scares me the most of any of them was Richard Ramirez. That dude was just off the hook, crazy evil.
Have you seen the documentary about the women who fall in love with killers? The woman who's
I have not seen that documentary. That sounds like something I need to watch and review.
Yeah. It's
I
interesting.
don't get it. How you can do, like I said, I have people that come on to my videos about Jeffrey McDonald, Chris Watts, and those are the main two, and Amanda Knox.
Mm-hmm.
I have people that come on and tell me, blast me for my opinions, tell me Chris Watts is innocent, Jeffrey McDonald is innocent, Amanda Knox is innocent.
Right. They don't list. Sometimes they'll list her PR talking points, but generally they don't go any further. Like that's the basis of their argument. I think it, therefore it is. Like you're wrong, therefore it is. And these people are highly manipulative, very good at getting their way. And they also, in the case of Amanda Knox, her dad, before he even got her a lawyer, went to Gogarty Marriott, got a PR agency. And so to spread her side of the story all over America. And that's how, that's really, and it works. They do it because it works. The father said that was the smartest thing they ever did.
And I got taken in by Amanda Knox. In my original video, I said I didn't think that she did it. And now that I've investigated it more, I kind of waver on that a little bit.
Well, I'm saying me too, before I ever had a podcast, I was just very taken. I was working at Oprah and I got a letter from the Friends of Amanda. One of those, either a family member or friend, right after she got arrested, listing all these facts that turn out to be not facts at all.
Yeah.
And I was really pulled in from that moment on. But if it really, your opinion can only depend on the facts you were given, which is why it's so important for people to continue to really not be a little skeptical and keep pressing to look at both sides of an argument and look at the transcripts before they ever start marrying a killer, shilling for a killer, supporting these killers. It's a really good idea.
The only people I think they don't really shill for is like JonBenet Ramsey. I don't see a whole lot of people shilling for the Ramseys. And I don't see that, maybe they're out there, but as far as my videos on it, they haven't. I haven't done any videos on Madeleine McCann, but I don't really see a whole lot of people defending her parents either.
Oh, they used to be. And they used to be. I don't know if it was one person or a ton of people. You can never tell. But they used to have their support. And they were really, really vicious. Not so much anymore. But
and those are the ones that have never been solved and will probably never be solved. Although we all have we're all 95% sure about what happened.
Yeah, we know.
So, but anyway.
This was a pleasure, Tracy. Thank you so much for having me on.
I look forward to talking with you about John Wayne Gacy on Sunday. Please come over to her channel. I will post it up. Once she has it set up, I will post it up on my community board. So come over and join us. And Ron has one more question for us. And Ron is my good buddy. She's been with me since I started the channel. She's also writing a book on the Daybell case.
So interesting.
She is great. She might be a great person for you to talk to, Roberta.
Excellent.
At some point. But what are our thoughts on Scott Peterson?
I just did 2 episodes on Scott Peterson on my channel. So you can, where I talked to Aaron Banks, who is one of the most knowledgeable people on that case. And I also talked to my friend Josh Diaz before that from the lab about the Scott Peterson case, right before it looked like he might get a new trial. I did 2 episodes on it. Those are pretty recent. my channel, check them out. But yeah, I think that spoiler alert, I think that he's guilty.
Yeah. I do too. I mean, I almost got taken in by some of the PR stuff on that one too. It's very easy to be taken. I can understand how a lot of these convicted people get their second reprieves because it is very easy to get taken in on that. But I don't think anyone else could have done that. You
Mm-mm.
know,
No, no.
it's not logical. The only ones that you and I disagree with on was the staircase.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I really wanted
That's
to.
the only.
I would love to have it really like a discussion someday on that.
Yeah, that'd be
If,
great.
I'm fascinated by your thoughts on that.
All right, everyone.
Right.
Thank you for joining us. I will see you soon. Until next time, Keto and Krime.